This is part 2 of our video series on urban intensification. Our first video covered laneway and coach houses, and in this video we're sharing an example of a creative urban intensification build in Ottawa with planner Brian Casagrande, where they are turning a single family home into a 13-unit apartment. I'm Casey Gray, the founder of The Conscious Builder, and on this channel we help you build and live more consciously. If you're new here, go ahead and click that subscribe button, and don't forget to check out the links in the description below. Before we get into the video, if you're a contractor looking to attract more clientele, interested in renovating or building high performance and passive homes, I highly recommend that you check out the Conscious Builder Academy. Our latest course is all about how to market and sell exactly these types of homes. You can head to consciousbuilderacademy.com to get this course, as well as a ton of other resources that we have there for you. The link is also in the video description below.
We get constant questions every day from either existing clients or new clients that are asking us about opportunities. I'm interested in buying this property. I'm thinking that it could be used for this purpose or that purpose, oftentimes for greater density than what's there. And what's tricky in those situations, and I find more like our existing clients, they start to sort of know these things intuitively, but a lot of the newer clients don't quite understand is that as much as the city's policies are supportive and encourage intensification opportunities, the policies also really look to avoid what we call spot zoning. And so for me, a spot zoning application is, you can imagine your typical single family residential street, or maybe it's a mix of singles and semis, but it's fairly stable residential street. And then all of a sudden somebody comes in and says, okay, right, generally in the middle of the interior of this block, I'm going to buy one or two of these properties, and I'm going to, seek FOTEN's help to change the zoning to something quite a bit more dense. And so, all of a sudden, instead of singles and semis, you might be introducing a triplex or, even a low-rise apartment building. And, they're looking at that as desirable because obviously it has the economic return that they're thinking about, and they're looking to capitalize on those policies. But what we have to explain to a lot of those clients is really the ability to rationalize that in the face of other policies that the city has about compatibility and transition of height and density is particularly challenging. And in most kinds, those cases will not be successful. And so we guide our clients to areas that have more of a bit of an edge condition or an existing condition that's conducive to the ability to do that. So a great example is 404 Eden, where we had a project on behalf of one of our clients. It's certainly one of the sort of small offshoot streets that come off of Richmond Road in Westboro. And so in this case, the client was looking at the first lot in from the traditional Main Street zoning. And so the traditional Main Street runs along Richmond Road, first lot in, and I believe this was an R3 zoning. So in this case, you have a street that predominantly was actually single family homes, but an R3 allows you to do up to a triplex. And so the client asked us, can you rationalize, can you see opportunity for me to pursue something higher than an R3? So for example, an R4 or an R5 zone. And so in that case, we looked at it and we said, okay, well, isn't that a nice transition? So you've got basically a built form that's permitted all around this site, because it actually backs onto Churchill in this case, that would allow heights in the neighborhood of 6 stories and in some cases higher. And so you're going from an R3, which is basically a 3-story maximum, and jumping up to a 6. So intuitively we said, well, okay, maybe a 3 or even a 4-story built form on this edge, transitioning from the street to the main street, makes some sense, because it's now basically stepping down in a more gradual way. And the city planning staff agreed with us ultimately on that. We came up with a 3-story design. We focused on designing the street front so that if you're walking along the street, so that it actually looked and felt like to a semi basically, but it had all this density and height that went back on the property, and it was a deeper site, which allowed us to do that. And so effectively, we got the zoning to allow for a 3-story low-rise apartment. I think there was something in the neighborhood of 13 units. In principle, we felt, and the city agreed, that it was a good transition site. So you're basically going, as I mentioned, from the R3 that allows, up to triplex to, in this case, an R4 that is the same height as those other buildings can be, but it's introducing more height and density. So, the argument we often make is, in the city, you'll see them actually going this direction in their new zoning bylaw, is the zoning will often prescribe a box, right? It's setbacks and height. But the question is, well, how do you fill that box? So you might fill it, and in the case of, as I was just speaking of, is a triplex, 3 units, and those 3 units can have up to 4 bedrooms each. So, you do the math, you potentially have somewhere in the neighborhood of 12 individuals living in that box. And then you could cut it into 12 or 13 individual 1-bedroom units, and you're marginally increasing the actual number of people. You're not increasing the box, but you're responding to a demand for housing units in the city of Ottawa. So this is the sort of, the creative approach that as planners we look for, and we look for locations where that impact and that design makes sense because it can be compatible and seeking the type of transition that the city's policies look to. In that case, we had to rezone the property, and the client needs to get a site plan approval. Now, those 2 applications can run together, or they can run, one after another sequentially. But if you're running them together, you're looking at about a year's time frame from the moment you submit to the moment you're done. And lately, it's been even worse than that at the City of Ottawa. They've been holding back on hiring. COVID has been an interesting phenomenon that they've had a challenge in dealing with, and a lot of people have. And so it's even getting worse in that regard. If you ran them one after another, you'd be looking at easily a year and a half, probably longer. In terms of fees, the city, their application fees are not insignificant either. I mean, I don't have the current fees in front of me, but generally speaking, rezoning applications are, plus 20 grand, 20, 25 grand. Site plan applications, it depends on what the nature of the site plan application is, but it can even be more than that. So in terms of just the city's fees alone, you're looking at, depending on what type of applications you need, you could be looking at $20,000 to $40,000 for those types of rezonings just for their fee. But then you need a whole series of studies, and they can add up quite quickly. I mean, we tell most of our clients, depending on the complexity of the application, that you could be spending $200,000 easily in just soft costs before you even get to the point of getting a building permit. And so that doesn't even include other considerations where decisions can still be appealed, which takes it into a whole different legislative framework, adding more time and more cost. So the development game, if you will, is not for the faint of heart, and it's not an easy one. But with the right advice early on, I think most people can try and understand those things and make sure that they're making the right decisions before they step too deep into these types of processes.
Glad you tuned in until the end. On our next episode in this series, we'll be talking about upcoming zoning bylaw changes that will have a significant impact on urban intensification. If you want to support the channel, be sure to check out the links in the description below. And until next time, I'm Casey Gray, and remember to live consciously.